because I was thinking, well, shoot, I was thinking there'd be lots of content to get into and dig through, which there is, but I was thinking, how could we go deeper? And then I was thinking, well, what if people came to this session that didn't come to the morning session? So I had all these things going on in my head. But what I decided to do was kind of take that conversation from the morning, I think I alluded to this, but now give you an opportunity, now having had that deeper, richer conversation, instead of leaving you with having to go figure out when to fit that into your day, blocking off time with with the friends from the room that you already had the conversations about, to maybe start putting pencil to paper on what that might look like for you, right? To start some of that work. And so I hope, and I guess I'll kind of get feedback from you if that works for you. So we'll kind of see how it goes, overall structure. But that's what we'll be doing. So essentially then taking that, well, I'll get to it when we get to the agenda piece. So the purpose here is then taking those moves and then bringing them to life in our own environments, right? It's always one thing to talk about it here at LCN, but then it's another thing to take it and action it, right? Where are we going with it? How are we bringing it to action? And so here we're going to have the opportunities to work in partners, small groups, and some as a whole group to see how we can experience that same collaboration that's modeled in the book, but here on a more here on a level that we have a chance to actually see what it's actually looking like for us. For Penny and Kelly, it became real because they got to know each other and they got to know each other's students. And so hopefully it'll be the same for us here in being able to do that work. So for our inclusion activity this afternoon, I want you to consider, and it does say morning session, but if you wanted to pull from the article, that's fine as well. But what was your most important point of learning? And so if you'd at least take about a minute and a half just for independent thought on that, and then open it up to your table. And for this one, I will go around the tables and just have somebody share out a point. So decide as a table what was the most important point that people really resonated with. But you'll each have your own individual to share, but then as we go after the activity ends, I'll have each table share something from that conversation. So right now, take a minute and a half individually to reflect. And then after that piece, we'll have you have table conversation and then share out to the larger group. Okay? All right. Go ahead. Take about a minute and a half silently. Okay, so big idea, big point of learning, just so we kind of get it out in the room, what folks are trending toward. And we'll start here and kind of work our way back and then forward. So what?
We talked about the fact that modeling the behaviors stood out to every one of us in sort of a different but related way.
Okay.
And from admin on down to us in the classrooms, that we're not going to ask the students to do something that we're not going to do. So
sure.
In logging our own reading and in doing the writing and then being able to talk about our own reading lives and modeling out what we're doing as readers, we know that that's so powerful, and we're talking about then our individual next steps on what that will look like going back.
Perfect. Right. So exhausting or exhilarating? Exhilarating right now, but exhausting maybe to think about. Great. Thank you. All right. Next table.
We talked about the 10 belief statements.
Okay.
And, just kind of talked about generating ideas for application and how we could get that out to people and what it meant for classrooms immediately and long term.
Sure. And it makes sense, right? It's so hard to move forward if you aren't having conversations around similar belief structures, right? And we run into that everywhere all the time. And if you can at least embark on conversations to at least see where people are coming from, it can still move you collectively forward. Even if you aren't perfectly in line, you can at least see where people's perspectives are coming from and work to those components. Thank you. How about back table there?
We talked about the belief statements as well. Even though this is kind of the context of reading and writing, they really apply to anything, and they apply to learning in general. We just focused in on different areas in those 10 different belief statements. One of them was about choice and how you can always give students choice in every assignment, whether it's with content, process, product, or conditions for learning. So I thought that that resonates with any content area, any discipline.
Great. All right. Thank you. Over here.
We kind of went around the table, and there were
we were trying to just get out what did each person think. But
Okay.
we didn't get all the way around the table, but 3 people did bring up, or 2 or 3 brought up the idea of assessing versus grading. And just like the deeper conversation about how do we move past that and give the right type of feedback so that we're growing all our learners, but then still in some way comply with things like athletic eligibility and some of those outside demands that really want to know some sort of measure of progress.
Yeah.
But how do we do that and create and not crush kids and continue to motivate them and show that there's still a chance and there's still time and you want to grow higher and you have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
So we didn't have any answers to that.
Sure.
But,
Yeah. Yeah. When I was interjecting with your middle school group earlier from months ago, we got into that piece too, and I said, you always know, you think assessment and grading is the same, but you realize it's so different. It's like religion. It's like you're in the middle of a conversation, and you're like, whoa, why is this getting so hostile? And it's like, oh, people are talking about grading. Because you can talk about looking at work and evaluating work, and my example there was you can have a great conversation around what's happening and have assessment, but once you put a label on where a person is versus the end, then it's on. If it's not where they expected to be or wanted to be or thought they were. And just that element alone, it's crazy. It's crazy how that changes. And I remember back in Common Core, I'd say something and people would start getting fired up. And early on, I didn't quite have that clear determination myself. And yet it became so clear to me that grading is just so loaded with emotion. And I get why. But assessment can be a whole nother beast if we can, again, balancing that. And there are not good answers. Well, there's the possibility of answers. There's research and other things we can fall back on. It's just back to the beliefs, getting around that understanding. So, great. Here.
So we also talked about the importance of modeling in writing, especially, and that part where it talks about the write daily. And if you miss a day, it's more difficult. So just modeling that, showing that metacognition while you're writing. Oh, I just got distracted because I saw someone wave something. Like that's something that I do in my classroom. I model it under the document camera. So when I'm stuck, I verbally say, stuck. I have no idea what I'm even talking
Where I would
about
go
right
here
now.
from here.
And I'll reread it and just kind of modeling those failures.
Yep.
And modeling the successes, and then feeling good, and then reading it out loud. It's like, I'm going to read this,
Yep.
all of those things. And then also not tying the grading in, but a lot of conferring, getting that grading before you actually get that
Yep.
test paper.
Yep.
So even if it's a short intervention, it can be 1 minute or 2 minute, the positive thing, and then this is what you could work on, and then the positive, and do you understand, what are you going to work on now? That kind of thing.
Yep.
So, and then about how all of this can be applied to any, writing, reading, studies, whatever. So
Yeah.
just all of that.
Yeah.
Modeling,
Yep.
that this can be across the curriculum.
Yep. Great. Thank you. All right. And then here.
What really resonated with us was that we're learning from each other, and it said in the book and the joy that they found, that Penny and that found with learning from each other, and in the middle school we've been able to do that. We have common planning this year, and just learning from each other, and even letting ourselves be real and say we tried, this didn't work, and some of it, and getting from each other, and that there's a lot of joy in that when you're able to collaborate.
Yeah, and you guys even shared earlier the idea of the notebooks.
Right.
And you had that
Yeah.
conversation right in the moment. So fantastic. All right, thank you. Great. So we're moving in that direction. So I'm glad to hear that even in most important point, you guys are building more on the conversations we started this morning. So our outcomes for this point are to continue to explore and consider those beliefs and pieces. The beliefs line up very similarly to the morning session, because what we're doing is taking and essentially literally going deeper, meaning more internalizing and maybe even getting to generating if we feel comfortable with it overall. So similar outcomes as it was this morning. So our agenda is, what is your why, investigating your structure, and then how to tackle motivation. So what I did here is we're going to spend this first portion really delving into your why, Then we're going to look at your structure and compare that to Penny and Kelly's structure and see if you can start getting some things down. And maybe you've made adjustments already, maybe not. I'm kind of playing with that. And then how to tackle motivation. So what I did is I took that whole idea of the starting of the reading and writing and what was the other one? A little bit of the structure. But instead of having you just really get into this diatribe of what you individually did, really I think the overall piece is how do you do it in a motivating way? Because we know motivation and engagement are so key, especially in adolescent. And so I coined it that way, and I've got that one's got some of the different parts of the book I didn't speak to already to pull into to talk about how we might look at that. So that part will also be for you to take some resources and put it together. So I messed you guys up. I didn't put the code up there, but if you're not comfortable in doing this from this morning, you have that PowerPoint. I'll help you get into it. You can get to the PowerPoint and the other resources, again, that I can share. That's why this morning I took you to the front part of the book and took you to the videos. I can't legally put those in here. You have to have the book and you have to go get it yourself, but it's just as easily accessible. I just can't link to it. Okay, so reason structure of the book. We got this down from this morning, planning decisions and teaching essential discourses, and we talked of demands of time, what are we planning for, and those core beliefs. And those three things go into this conversation of why. So what I want to do is embark you then on your own. And I told you to see this again. So however you want to go about establishing your why, I'm going to offer two opportunities. And you heard my elevator speech, even though I didn't name it as such. But when I basically let you process this and then I spoke as to how this still resonates for me. If I were to bring Kirsten in here, who did the David Kilpatrick piece because of our MTSS work, she would have given you the same elevator speech, and she will give you the same why. Kirsten is, I'm going to get this wrong, but she's either a psychologist or social worker. I don't remember which, but I think it's touch and go, one and how they feel about the other. So if I say she's one thing and she says, actually I'm this, and I go, oh yeah, sorry, that's a big deal there, isn't it? So rudely, I don't have that clarified for myself, but she deals with the behavior side of things here. And in MTSS, the academic. And so that's why she's leading the Kilpatrick session, because I was leading this session. But she's more of that behavior special ed field to the mix in our team. And then I do the reading academic, and then we have a school improvement person. The three of us have that collegial conversation on a regular basis, and any of the three of us could speak to this as our why, just to give you a feel of how that looks for me here at the ISD. The early literacy coaches, we haven't necessarily established this exact why, but we've had conversations around it, and I present this especially from the angle of my MTSS work, and they understand that and how that looks. So this really defines at this point a lot, and it wasn't even my own words. It was something that when we first were introduced to it back in 13, 14, that we just were like, wow, that just really encapsulates all these conversations we've been having and how it works. However, I was able to speak to it. So I'm offering that opportunity here for you as teams, if you want to get into teams or just into dialoguing. I want you to consider a 30-second elevator speech. So what we'd like is a 30-second elevator speech that would be your why. So why are you doing what you're going to be doing with your students in your classroom, or whatever your angle is, right? So if you're a coach, why? Why are you going to be providing the services you are providing? If you're getting confused on it, don't forget, take these things into consideration. But develop your own why. So why are you doing what you're doing? So you can do it from the angle of the 30-second elevator speech. You might want to do a visual, but we just want to let you play with it. And then, if you're doing it as a team, that's great. But if you're in different groups, after we get a chance, we're going to want to share it with the members of our table. We aren't going to share it necessarily to the larger group, because this is kind of a personal thing. So I don't necessarily want to make it a public display. But in our table groups, let's delve into it and talk about it and just kind of play with this and see where it gets us. So I was going to allot about 10, 15 minutes to this to just really let us get into it and put it into application. And I'll come around and check in on tables. And I know there's one person that was not here this morning, and I just want to create context there. And so if not, flag me down. I'll come in. But I think everybody else was here this morning. So, okay. So what questions do you have? And again, if you're not comfortable with that whole terminology of why overall, fall back on these pieces, right? And some of the things we were even just talking about, and how you're going to carry that forward, and what you might say to somebody who was to walk by your room and say, hey, you're doing that different. Why are you doing it like that? what would you say to that question? Because that is your why. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead. Okay. Great. So love the conversation, the buzz in the room, and I appreciate your willingness to delve into this sensitive topic. And you can see why it's so hard to establish that why, or look at those belief pieces, right? Demands of time while you're planning for core beliefs. It's a really sensitive part of a conversation, and it really puts you in a sensitive spot where you got to kind of put yourself out there. And the one thing I'll say about it is, as you're working with it, and it will continue to evolve, right, as we learn and hear more, one of the things of consideration I really want you to take is, how will you make this very aware to students in whatever way that needs to be, right, so that they understand, because your students are going to also be identifying that you're changing or doing things differently. So what they say to us in adaptive schools is, people will start looking at you funny and say, tell them why you're messing with them, right? So why are you acting different? Just tell them. Say, hey, I'm working on some things, trying to bring things more forward and get more engaged and provide more opportunity to get to all learners in the classroom. Be open and honest with them. They know something's up. Acknowledge it and have them help or embrace you along the way, however that works. So, again, something we talk about in adaptive schools. Again, I know that's touchy too, but don't be afraid to show that out there. Similar to you sharing your writing, sharing that you're looking at crafting things to get it where you think that they need to be, or however you want to word that. Okay? So thank you for diving into that. As promised, we won't have any overall share out because I know it's a sensitive topic. So now let's delve into some template work, right? So to help us on this, right, we had this criteria from this morning, right? Don't think of it as, well, this is our 8th grade schedule. What does yours look like? Think of what its schedule would look like for all. Know it's malleable, so even once you get it down this way, it's not going to be set in complete stone. And then, oh shoot, I forgot to log in on this one. So what I'd like you to do is go ahead and start work. Since I don't have it up, I won't waste more time, but start work on these next pieces, because you have the opportunity in pages 26 and 27, is it? Wherever they have their agendas. But what I want you to start with is your own, right? I want you to put down, what's your current state? So what's your current state? And consider those pieces, and then reflect on pages 26 and 27, and then what are changes that you might make, or what do you think is going to stay the same? So Penny and Kelly have that out there. And in about 5 minutes, once I get it up and running, I'm going to interrupt you, because even the tiniest little things, there was so much dialogue that went into it, even with Penny and Kelly. It was amazing. So I'm going to pull up a dialogue they had around the timing. So Kelly's at 10 minutes. Penny's got whatever she's got, and they talked about what is the best fit. And it's an interesting back and forth. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes to start to delve into that, and then I'll cue that video up, and then, like I said, in 5 minutes I'll interrupt and show you that, and then give you more work time. All right? Questions you might have? All right, go ahead. Okay, so I'm going to pause the conversation. And if you're laughing at yourselves about hemming and hawing over maybe one little aspect, then you're going to get a chance to see Penny and Kelly do the same thing. So this is funny. This is over independent reading time and what that means. So again, this is around independent reading time. That's okay. So Kelly has 10 minutes allotted. Penny has 20 minutes allotted. And so between the two, they're discussing what's the best and why. Okay? And what you would think would be a pretty straightforward thing, see where they end up. Hold on, I'll... Probably this volume. So be prepared here.
Okay.
I'll start it over. I just want to get the right.
A number of conversations that we had
in which I just decided,
How's that?
like you, to
Good enough?
dedicate the first 10 minutes of class. The reason I think some of my kids are fake reading is they don't have contact with a teacher. Right? When you're in a class of 37, you can sit around in the back and
Yep.
you can be a wallflower and
Yep.
you can fake it and join conversations and things like this. And so one of the big shifts for me this year came out of a number of conversations that we had, in which I just decided, like you, to dedicate the first 10 minutes of class every day for independent reading. And I know some people listen to that and say, well, 10 minutes isn't very much time, you don't get into flow and all of that. And I see that concern, but really the value in that 10 minutes of reading every day is that we are individually conferring with 3 different readers every single day. So even in a class of 36, kids are going to see me, every 3 to 4 weeks. And there's it sounds more negative than I mean it, but there's no hiding there. And it also presents me the opportunity to try to connect kids with books that that'll get them going, that'll help them gain that traction. Or the 9th graders were getting ready to read Romeo and Juliet, and so that's a tough reading undertaking for somebody who's a reader. And so what we're trying to do is get words in front of kids' faces so that they can gain a little bit more fluency. And
Don't you feel that, though, that 10 minutes is never enough? Don't you feel that, like, I don't want to read for 10 minutes and have somebody say, let's move on. I'm barely into my book, 10 minutes in. I'm finally remembering the setting and the characters and where I am. And that block of time, both you and I talk about with Nancy Atwell and others who, the kids are reading 40 minutes or more at one sitting. Like, do our kids have the stamina to do that? Mine don't right now. Many of my students can read maybe 15, maybe 20. 20 would be the outside. But what does it take to enter the text?
it is a stamina issue. Although I'm seeing my kids' stamina increase. I think you'll see, maybe it's because you're there, but if you could be a fly on the wall, I think my kids will, well, it's only 10 minutes, so they don't have that issue. But we have an SSR period too. This is a different class. And when those kids came to me in 9th grade, they could not read for 25 minutes straight. And today, you could hear a pin drop on the 24th minute. But you raised another interesting issue. I mean, maybe instead of 10 minutes every day, maybe I should do it twice a week for 20 minutes so that they get some deeper level of attention span being developed. And
because what we're trying to do is the time in class gets them so connected to their book that they read outside of class. That's our goal.
Right.
So that's the 20% though. You're taking 20% of your class time. You're carving it out of a really busy schedule with an entire room of kids because it matters that much. And I was curious, do you ever have them read longer? Because you know how Linda Reef talks about on Fridays they read for 30 or 40 minutes to get the stamina piece, and then she confers with 15 kids.
it's something we should talk about. It's something I've been thinking about. Because 10 minutes really isn't enough time
It isn't
to
enough.
lose yourself.
Right.
I picked 10 minutes because I only have 50.
I know.
And there's a ton of needs there. But you're right. Maybe the thinking is instead of 10 minutes every day, it's 20 minutes every other day. And I still could meet with 6 kids instead of 3.
Right.
And yet they're having more time to develop that, to get lost in the book.
That's the thing. We have to figure out a way where they have opportunities to get lost in it. What I'm not sure is how soon you can give up the 10 minutes a day, because the kid who has no momentum doesn't read. So you put him back and give him 10 after not reading for 4 or 5 days. It becomes really complicated.
Right. Well, your situation's harder because you don't see your kids every day.
Right.
So that adds a whole other layer of complexity to that question. But the other reason I went every single day was because I found with particularly 9th grade kids, if they're not in a reading habit and you don't have them read every day, then they don't bring their book today's the reading day, I didn't bring my book.
Exactly.
So we read every single day for the first quarter, but now that the habit is established, maybe it's time to think about 20 minutes on Tuesday and 20 minutes on Thursday and 10 minutes on Friday.
Right.
Or maybe all day Friday becomes a reader's workshop kind of class.
Well, we talked about that because mine, while my sub is there and I'm here, is having my kids in a reader's workshop with longer periods of time to read, and they're doing this kind of directed reading response in their notebooks. And I think there's real value in getting kids to read for longer periods of time and also to reflect on that reading immediately in their writing. And we just don't have that built in enough.
Right.
So there, who would have thought? 10 minutes of independent reading led to all that conversation, right? Mm-hmm. And you could see how, and I made mention of it, right, how he circled around, he went full circle in it and said, well, now wait a minute, I got to have them every day, or... So anyway, throw that into your conversation, and we'll probably go another 7-8 minutes or so looking at schedule, just based on time. But I wanted you to have that frame of thinking into your conversations as they currently are. Go ahead and continue. Probably another 5 minutes. All right. So hopefully you've had a chance to kind of delve into the schedule piece now. You got a chance to see what where your schedule was. You got to hear some conversation around schedule and what that looks like, and at least maybe have something to try or consider, or something that's confirmed in what you're already doing. So let's move into motivation. So I did link this handout, but let's just look at our resources. So I put together a little bit of a text set, if you will. So if you go to page 30, I have not referenced this yet, saved it for here. On page 30, you have a really nice graphic about what happens when only 10 minutes a day is added to a student's reading. Okay? There's one starting graphic. Then on the very next page, 32 and 33, at the very top of 32, you've got some guided questions, right? Because what happens is we say, all right, we create this independent reading time. You heard them say the word conference. And then we run into this issue of, well, they all have different books, so now what? And how could I possibly get into that, right? So they offer up what are some questions that you might ask, right, of a student in a conference. So while they're reading and you're conferring, and you might say, well, they don't like to read, or they do like to read, whatever they've indicated, questions for each side of that coin. And then what they did below is they played out some scenarios. So if students were downright hostile, talks to you about some things there. Some of this ranging all the way to some of the students being avid, or abandoners, or whatever. And so they've got some little excerpts there between those two pages. The third that I'll bring around to you is the letter that I linked to, and it's to parents and students. And this is a letter written by Penny and Kelly, and it just gives you some key talking points and ideas around why it's important. It might overlap that page with all the nice bar graph visual. It might overlap some of that as well overall. And then I just wanted to highlight as your last piece, so you got 3 components. You've got the chart on page 30. Then you've got the questions on page 32, 33. I'll be bringing this handout around as your third piece. And I'm going to show you a video of Kelly conferencing. I think it's with Andrew. So you can kind of see him kind of work through a conference. You'll hear some of those questions. If you want to pay attention to the questions on 32 and 33, you may hear him use those questions. But the one thing you're going to notice, again, if you are worried about they all might be on a different book, is the general nature of his question. It's not a specific thing like what is... He's not feeling like he has to draw out what's actually happening in the book. He's leaving it up to the kid to make the connections. So I decided to term this motivation instead of you all serial sharing how you start the reading, independent reading or the independent writing with the notebooks. But I wanted you to have this to kind of, again, build that philosophy and to think about what is the motivating factor for kids. So here's that video. And this is Kelly and Andrew. Let me know if this is too
Okay,
loud.
we will begin today with our reading block. Books out, books open. I'll be conferring with a few of you as we head into reading block today. Good morning. So let's talk a little bit. Where are you? Let's open it up this way. Show me where you are. Page 100. You know, we didn't really talk about This is the book club book, right? Is this your book club book?
No.
Oh, it's not your book club book. Tell me what you're reading.
I'm reading Orange Enemy.
Curveball, right? Not the book club book. He's going with it.
It's the third book of the series that I read. It's like the last book.
It's the last?
Yeah.
Of three?
Of three, yeah.
Yeah. You know what that's called?
The trilogy.
A trilogy. Good word. And so you like the other two so much, you're still going?
Yes.
So where are you? About 100 pages in?
Yeah, I was like at 150, but I didn't really get it, so I went back to like the last points where I got it, because like a lot of phrases, a lot of words are like made up, so.
It has its own language?
Yeah, pretty much.
So you got to a point and you felt you weren't comprehending?
Yeah.
And you did what? You backed up?
Yeah, I backed up.
Talk to me, did that help?
Yeah.
How far did you back up and how did you know where to back up to?
I backed up to the point where I like last thought that I knew, because the last two books, like this kind of goes over, some of it goes over what happened in the last two books,
Right.
and because like each book is separated into three parts, part 1, part 2, part 3, so like I went back to like the middle or around the end of part 1.
Oh, sometimes I do that, especially if I'm away from a book a long time, like I haven't read it in a week, and then I go back and I'm not quite sure where I am. So I'm glad that you use that backward strategy. I like that a lot. So you feel like you're going okay so far right now? Can you tell me a big idea you think might be emerging from this book?
Is that an actual question in there? Is anybody checking? A big idea? You don't have to look. I just wondered.
Okay, so there's this, like it's pretty much in its own, like it's kind of hard to explain, but I think like the theme is that, you know, everyone has their own power, even though, yeah, pretty much everyone has their own inner power within them that they will, like if they know how to use it, they could.
So when you say inner power, do you mean like a superpower or do you mean like an inner strength?
Yeah, an inner strength.
And that sometimes in life what?
Like sometimes in life it might seem like it goes away or it's like it's gone, but it's still there and you could still use it to help you in a lot of ways.
Okay, well, I'm glad you're still going. I made a note from a previous request, and I know you're in the middle of this right now, but you also asked to read The Martian, right?
Yeah.
Have you seen the movie yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was read the book before.
Okay, no, I'd like to hear that. So I'm going to give this to you. You can hold on to it for as long as you need it if you want to finish this one first, but if I leave it on the shelf, somebody's going to take it. So just hold on to that, and tell me, next time we talk, we'll get into that a little bit. Okay, cool. Keep going. Good job.
All right. So a chance to see him getting into that conversation. I think Penny must have been also maybe conferring. I kept hearing that voice, didn't I? Did we do that? Yeah. So anyway, so those two resources, page 30, you got a chance to see Kelly interacting with Andrew there. And whoops. And I want you to consider, and again, you can just stay in your table groups. I was going to try to shift it down to partners, but I think the way we flesh out, I think our table groups are a good fit. So let's just stick with our table groups and maybe share how you're building in that time or what that looks like, and consider these resources. And I will get a big idea from each table for this one. Just an aha moment or something that you want to take back with you from this conversation, and we'll probably spend about 10 minutes with this. So I'll bring around this handout and dialogue around these prompts, and then I'll just have table groups share versus getting around the room, etc., since the way we're built out. So we'll go around the room by table, and this time we'll start here, if you don't mind. What's something that came from the conversation?
Something.
Anything. A big idea. Okay. We'll start with any one of them.
I think we just are in many different places with conferring, and we kind of bounce ideas about how we could push ourselves a little bit or even just get started. And
sure.
There was a lot of
conversation around conferring and what that looks like.
We talked about, I teach strictly writing, and I was just talking about how a couple days ago I only got like half of my students, and then without everything that
That's
comes
really
in,
good.
whether it's a fire drill or whatever, and you can't get to the rest of them, and they kind of get stuck behind. So bringing maybe 3 or 4 up and just having like 3
Small
listen,
group.
yep,
Mm.
just having them listen and you're talking, and then
Yep.
afterwards asking, what did you hear? What did you learn from this conference?
Sure.
And so they can maybe reflect on their own writing when they do
Yep.
this. So maybe to save time. I haven't tried it, but
Sure.
I'd be willing just
Mhm.
for time's sake.
Yeah. Good old conferring. It's a very ambiguous beast. And there's a lot of good variations of it as well. And then we'll just circle around this way. So how about this table?
With ours, we're adopting Lucy Calkins, and we're in middle school. And we've got our schedules down, but we have to have some faith in our schedules. We still want to talk a lot during those mini lessons.
Sure.
We've got to let the mini lessons go and get the kids out
Yep.
there doing their thing, with the hope that the ones that do know what's going on talk to the other ones that may not know what's going on and sharing
Yep.
it. Each other.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you. Here.
We talked about conferring a lot too, and we were just talking about how we were going to meet with different numbers of students. We have co-taught situations here, several of them.
Oh, okay.
So we were talking about relationship building and what the best idea is for conferring. Also, if it's one teacher with half of the students and then with the other, when to swap or if to
Okay.
swap, and
Sure.
then just touch points within the conferences and kind of like we're at different places.
Yeah.
So suggestions for that.
Yeah. All right. That's a curious thought. Like, should you swap? I don't know. If that's a great question, actually. Thanks. I'm not giving out answers, but I don't have them. So yeah. How about here?
Yeah, we actually had like 2 different kind of conversations.
Okay.
So, we talked a little bit about just the difference of from elementary to middle school to high school and how it's just different fitting in that time.
Okay.
But there was conferring happening during the intensification.
Okay.
That typically goes right after the teaching. Same thing we're talking in the district.
Sure. Yeah. And so trying to, back to this thing from Fullen, right? Like trying to take advantage, and we talked about it here, all these different things we can take advantage of, right? So here, you've got kids that maybe already get it, but the lesson's going too long. How might you do some of those turn and talk moves or the partner conversations where you take advantage of that human capital in the room, and then there you're talking about capital across the district. If we're doing Calkins and getting those routines and the language into kids in the elementary, they're going to bring that to the middle school and then bring it to the high school. Right. Yeah, there's definitely efficiencies. Now you got me going with systems, so thank you.
Well, when he was talking about the high schoolers reading for 25 minutes, I was like, kindergartners.
Yeah, right,
So,
sure.
Yeah, it makes a big difference
Yeah.
if you have that linear
Yeah.
throughout the district.
And then somewhere along the way, even if they did have that, it got lost, right? And that's what they hear a lot in their reading inventory conversations. Great. In the back.
We talked a lot about conferring and just what it looks like and our settings and how we have that conversation, how we track those conversations, how often they happen.
Okay. Great. Yep. The conferring thing, it's quite the beast, and it plays into motivation so importantly. And in the back.
We were talking about, we have built in now for a couple of years at least 10 minutes of reading every day. And we were talking about how excited we were that this year's incoming freshmen, they must have done a great job at the middle
Nice.
school here.
Thank you.
Yay. Coming freshmen are like, sit down, open up those books, and you're like interrupting them when you say, hello everybody, you know. So,
I'm over here.
yeah, so that's been great. And then we do
Awesome.
also have a little bit of conversation about conferring. We're still not there with daily writing in all of our classes, and building that in. And what do we let go, and how do we maybe reimagine what we're teaching and how we're doing it. We talked about reading conferences and building those in. And I know they do it during independent reading. We're still finding that distracts the students who, takes them out
Sure.
of their books. So we try and find different
Yeah.
points in the day when they're working.
So they're modeling it as it works for them. You're not quite seeing that yet. So what might you do otherwise? Okay. All right. Great. Thank you. And glad that works out from middle to high, and you're here to hear him say it. So you know it had to be true. Okay. So great. Appreciate the overall time and effort put into this session. We have just 4 minutes left, and we have time to get into reflection. So again, that last piece of paper in your packet, if you wish, again, what are things that are vital to communicate back to your building, reading or writing team? And so maybe this is more of a building team if your entire reading or writing team are here. And how might you communicate that? So what's the manner in which you will communicate it? And if your whole reading and writing team is here, one challenge maybe is what would you put together for communication for maybe a larger audience? Whether it be a district level team or a board or whatever, right? So you have that opportunity, maybe communicate that back, what you're getting from the opportunity to be here. So again, let's just take 2 or 3 minutes, and then again, you can open that to table conversation, but I'll butt in 3 minutes, and then we'll shift to the next step. So, great.